Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blackwood Decor's YouTube channel, and today you and I are going to build this beautiful end table. This is completely within your grasp as a beginner woodworker. I promise you that, and I believe in you. I know that you can do it. I'm going to walk you through step by step. There's also free plans in the description down below. This doesn't take a bunch of power tools to make. It takes a jigsaw, a trim router, a couple of chisels, a couple of drill bits, and a handsaw. That's all we use to make this beautiful, beautiful piece. But make sure you're staying until the end of the video, because there is a curve somewhere in this piece that your eyes subconsciously, they accept that curve. But if you forget to put it in there, it tends to make the project look a little bit different. So make sure you're watching to the end of the video, because you don't want to skip that step. Yeah. Let's go get started. This project really doesn't take very much wood. All of this wood is 3/4 inches thick. So basically any wood that you can find from a major box store. But as much wood as we need is going to be 3 pieces that are 6 inches wide by at least 20 inches long. Those are gonna be for our legs. And then we need enough wood that we can glue together where we can make a 16-inch circle. That's gonna be our tabletop. Those will be for our legs. So let's go get these glued up real quick, so that way, as this glue's drying, we can start working on our leg pieces. I did have a spot right here where it didn't want to get even, so I just put a little clamp on there, and that sucked it flat. Whenever we're measuring, we want to make sure that we're measuring close to the edge of the board, because if you do it from the center, sometimes you can create a radius. So woodworking is all about precise measurements. And if you're looking for some tips and tricks, check this video out up here after this one. All right, our first measurement is going to be 16 3/4. Make a dash there, or that's 42.7 centimeters. Our second measurement is 18 5/8, or 47.3 centimeters. Our last one is going to be 19 inches. So I'll make a mark there. That's 48.4 centimeters. We're gonna take our square. This first one that we marked, the 16 3/4, we're just going to make that one about quarter away, halfway across the board. Doesn't need to go all the way across. These next two, those are going all the way across the board. Now, we need to make our other measurements here. So the first one is going to be 7/8 of an inch, or 2.2 centimeters. Make a mark there. Our second is going to be on this line. We're gonna go 1 5/8 inches. Make a line there. That's gonna be for our circle, so I'm gonna mark that circle. Our last mark is gonna be on our 19-inch line that's across there, and that is going to be 5 5/8. I'm gonna make a line there. Next step is our circle. So I've got a 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit. We're going to use either a drill, or if you have a drill press, we're gonna cut that circle all the way through. We've got our hole drilled out, we've got everything marked out. Now we need 2 small nails, and at our 19-inch mark in the 5 5/8, we are going to put a nail right there, very surface thin. You don't wanna hammer it all the way through. And then at our 7/8 inch, you're gonna put a nail right there. We've got our 2 nails in our board. We need to find something that is flexible. I like using just little thin kerf pieces that are cut-offs, or if you have a ruler, you just need something that is bendable. Or you could also do this kind of by hand. But I'm gonna use this piece of wood and kind of find a good line that I like. Remove our nails. We've got our 19-inch mark all of this is waste. So we're gonna go remove this. You could either use a table saw, a circular saw, a miter saw, use whatever you have. Or if you only have a jigsaw and a square, you could use that too. Now what we're gonna wanna do is mark the cutout for this hole. So we're gonna take our square, put it right at the bottom of that circle. It's gonna meet up right at the bottom. Mark a line straight across. Then we're gonna flip it over, use our 45, and we're gonna find the top, the tippy top of that circle, and we're gonna mark. So all this is going to be cut out. Okay, we've got our board cut to length, so 19 inches. All that waste material has been removed. This section of our curve is going to be what we're going to cut out next. All of this material is going to be waste material. We're going to use a jigsaw to do that process. We want to make sure we work as close to that line as possible. We want to be slow, we want to be neat, because we're going to use that piece as our template for all of our other legs. Straight out of the jigsaw, just a little bit of hand sanding on this thing, and I mean, it's got a really nice finish already. Now, we need to cut out this waste material here. I'm going to use the jigsaw because we're just using basic tools, but if you have a miter saw, you can use that. If you could use a hand saw, you could really use anything. You just want to make sure that there's a smooth transition from that line into that circle and then out of that circle. So make sure you're taking your time. As you can see, I didn't get these lines perfect, but that's okay. We're woodworkers. So we just gotta solve that problem, and there's a couple ways to do that. We could either use a file to clean those up, we could use sandpaper, we could do it by hand, or we could utilize the next tool that we're gonna be using the most, so this will be good practice. We're gonna use the router. The way that we're gonna fix that little snafu is with one of these. This is a 1/2 inch flush trim router bit. The way these work is this little bearing runs across whatever template you want it to, and it cuts the wood that's underneath of it to that exact template. These are 1/2 inch. That'll be important for the next step in the process, but these are awesome. If you don't have one of these, I will include a link to these and the 1.5 or 1 3/4 Forstner bit down in the description below. They're Amazon affiliate links, so you can pick some up for yourself. They're super cheap. I think they're like 20 or 30 bucks. But these in a router is one of the most versatile tools in the shop. And we are going to line that up ever so precisely. We'll leave ourselves some room on this clamp for the router. We're going to take a real light pass. I only went down a little bit, just enough, so that way we can put that bearing on that place, use that as the reference to cut the rest of that waste off. Because there's not much clamping space on here, I'm just going to use some double stick tape. Definitely putting a little burn marks in there, but we'll be able to clean that up with the sander. We've got our first leg completely cut out. We're going to take this template, we'll trace it out on here, we'll take our jigsaw or our bandsaw and we're going to cut not on the line. We're going to leave a little bit of room because we're going to go back with that palm router, the flush trim bit, and we're going to make these all exact. And then also a little pro tip, make a template of your template on some MDF, so that way if you ever want to make this again, you don't have to go through that first process. You've got a template already made. I've got my clean template up on top. It is clamped down to the bench. So we're gonna work around all the areas that we can. Then we'll move one clamp at a time and we'll clean up those last little bits. Our piece that looks like this, now we'll just use this top little bit as our reference with that flush trim router to clean up the rest of that. Remember that line that we drew way earlier? That is going to be for a rabbet because we are going to make this out of joinery. That's how this table is going to go together. Don't be scared. It's going to be super simple. So let me show you how to measure this out, and that way we can replicate it on all three. So we know that this line is 3/8 of an inch from this edge. So this is 3/8 of an inch thick, and we know that our flush trim router bit is a 1/2 inch thick. So that's going to be the thickness of our tenon that we are going to put into our tabletop. So we need to make sure that it is going to be 3/8 of an inch thick on both sides. So we're going to use a fence on our router, and we need to figure out the center line in this and then go a 1/2 inch, so a 1/4 inch on either side, and then we're going to take off that material. So we know that 1/2 of 3/4 is 3/8. So make a mark there. And then we're going to go a 1/4 of an inch to either side of that. It's going to give us our 1/2 inch tenon in the middle of this. So if you have a tape measure or a ruler that has the locking mechanism, so that way you could make those scribe lines, that works great. Or if you have a wheel marking gauge, these things work awesome. So I'm gonna get to my line there. Pull that down. Double check that it is a 1/2 inch in the middle there. Perfect. So that's going to be our measurement. So that's our 1/2 inch in the middle. So we're going to cut off the 1/4 of an inch on each side. And then that cut is going to be 3/8 of an inch deep or long. Now most palm routers, they come with some type of a fence. So that way you can make rabbet joints or rabbet cuts. So we need to make sure that from the edge of this fence to the edge of our cutter blade is exactly 3/8 of an inch. And then the depth, we'll have to adjust that as well. We need to make sure that it is only 1/8 of an inch deep. That's gonna be our cut for these. If you don't have a fence for your router, you can use a double stick tape and a piece of wood, a flat piece of wood method. It just takes a lot longer. It's a little bit less precise. So let's get this measured up exactly. We'll do a test piece before we start cutting our good pieces. Last step in this for these legs is obviously this wedge joint will not fit into a mortise, so we need to come in here with our square and we need to cut Now it's time to work on the tabletop, so let's get it out of these clamps. If you have an old chisel, we're just gonna knock off a couple of these pieces of glue real quick. We're gonna hit it with 80 grit sandpaper, just to kind of knock down some of the glue lines on both sides before we go to the next step. Now, if you take this fence completely off on most routers, you turn it completely around and upside down, you will notice a 1/4 inch hole right here that is roughly 8 inches away from the blade. So that way we have a pivot point that we can utilize to make our circle. So let's try and find the center. This board's 17 inches, so we'll go 8.5, 8.5. That's roughly our center point. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this next part can get sketchy if you try and take too big of bites at once. These routers have a 1/4 inch hole that's right here that you can use to make round cuts. So I've got this little thing that I've used before. I'm just going to use double stick tape and or CA glue and some tape on here because that will be my pivot point. But I have switched my blade to the smallest little blade I've got, and I'm not cutting all the way through on one pass. I'm only taking maybe a 1/16 of an inch at a time. I'm just trying to create a lip around the outside, then I will cut it with the jigsaw, come back with the flush trim router to clean it up. Do this at your own risk. Do not take too big of a bites. That's when it gets super, super dangerous. And if you feel sketched out about it at all, literally put a screw through this thing, use that as your pivot point, make this the bottom of your table. Nobody will ever see it. That's probably the safest way to do it. Do as I say, and not as I do. Right. Circle's looking good, but let's say we accidentally lost our center point. We need that center point for the rest of figuring out where we're going to put the legs. So how do we find that? If you take a square and you put the corner of that square anywhere, and then you mark one side, two side, you draw a line from those 2 points. And then you just do that again. So put the corner somewhere in the circle, on the edge of the circle. I'm gonna mark there, mark there. And scribe a line across. Found our center point. Well, we're gonna need that guy because now we need to divide this into 3 quadrants for our legs. Let me show you how to do that. All right, I've sanded off the other lines because I don't want us to get confused, and unfortunately my little wing caliper thing here is not long enough. So we gotta do it the old-fashioned way. So you gotta find a piece of string or take off a shoelace or what have you and tie it to your pencil, and you are going to put your pencil in that center line, and you're going to pull that rope straight down to that end point. Then you're going to take your pencil and draw a circle. These 2 points to the center, we're going to mark them. We'll erase those lines, but there is our 3 lines. That is where our 3 legs will be placed. I think we want our legs to sit in about 1/2 inch, and the only flat spot that we have on these legs is this. So that's what we're going to use to gauge. I'm going to mark in 1/2 inch, and we're also going to number all of our legs from here on out. So this will be 1, this one will be 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. Just that way, in case we do make any hiccups or these aren't absolutely perfect, they're marked and we'll build them to that point. So 1 inch off, we know that this right here is flat, so I'm going to take my square, move it to that 1/2 inch point. There we go. I'm going to make 2 rough marks there because we're going to try and make a jig. That way we can easily route out all 3 of these and we don't have to measure and make separate jigs. We're going to make 1 jig that's going to cover all of our mortises. So there's a few different ways that you can execute this. I'm going to make a jig because I think I'm probably going to build a few more of these because I think I'm going to like the way that they're going to turn out. So we know that this tenon, yours might be a little different, but mine is 4.5 inches long. So are these, the other 2 legs. So I want to be able to make a jig that I can clamp from this side so I can feed my router in and make that 1/2 inch wide but 3/8 inch deep tenon or mortise, whatever it's called. So I think I'm going to take this to the table saw, and what we're going to try to accomplish, I'm going to use the table saw, cut out 1/2 inch. I'm going to drill a hole back here that's a 1/2 inch hole and make this exactly 4.5 inches. I'll glue and brad nail a piece up here so that way it's absolutely perfect, 4.5 inches, and I can clamp from back here, router it, pivot, router. I think that's the plan. We're going to measure 4.5 inches back, make a mark. We're going to square that up. We're going to go up front here, pick a random spot, doesn't really matter, but I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch gap. Square these up. I'm going to take this Forstner bit, 1/2 inch Forstner bit, and we're going to put a hole right in the back there. Let's take this over to the table saw and we'll rip that down. That'll be our stopping point. We'll put another piece of wood, we'll cut a piece and glue it up here, brad nail it, and that'll be our jig. So I just did a little test with my legs and they're not fitting in there. So I'm gonna have to creep up on this. So I'm gonna run it through one more time. Perfect fit. Because we know that that mortise starts at 1 3/8, I cut a piece that is perfectly 1 3/8. We'll glue that to the bottom of this, so that way all we have to do is butt that up perfectly, make sure it's in line, clamp it down, and we'll be able to router out the mortises absolutely perfectly. If you do not have CA glue, an activator in your shop, you are missing out. line up my jig here, the inside of that hole. So that way I can drill a hole right here. That way our router bit has some place to start and not dig in and want to grab. The thickness of this is exactly 3/8. So that's what we want. So I'm going to go all the way down to that. Router bit has a place to start. Line this back up. Now all I gotta do is clean this edge up with a little 1/2-inch chisel. Gotta take off that corner there. All right, we've cleaned up our mortises with just a chisel, just some really easy light work. And our legs are fitting beautifully. So I'm gonna hit this with the sander real quick. I'm gonna sand up through the grits. All right, we've got our 16th inch round over bit put on our legs. We got everything sanded down. We could call this thing good, but I think that there's one step that if we go the extra mile, it's going to transform this piece. Our legs are kind of the centerpiece of this end table. That's what our eyes are gonna be drawn to because they're very beautiful, they're very unique. So I wanna take the top and I want to create a chamfer so that way it sends our eyes from the top into those legs. I think that's going to be the little bit of flair that your eyes will pick up on, your subconscious will pick up on, that's going to make this piece set apart from all of the rest. Let's go do that now. Just like our template that we made for our legs, I made a template for the top. That way we could batch these things out and we don't have to go through all of that other work process. So we are going to use 15-degree chamfer bit with our bearing up on the top there. So your template is going to be on the bottom and that bearing is going to ride along that template and it's going to create that 15-degree angle all the way around our workpiece. I'm going to utilize some painter's tape just to kind of mitigate our glue squeeze out and or clean up after the squeeze out. And we're going to get this thing glued up. It is out of the quote-unquote clamp. And one last final little rub down here with the hands. I think it's ready for finish.